You know, I'm a pretty big fan of platformers, especially those classic games from the SNES or even further back on the NES. But one game that's always been difficult for me was Mega Man. As the brainchild of Akira Kitamura, the first Mega Man for the NES birthed a new best-selling platformer for Capcom. As I played through this game, I wanted to see what made it so different from other platformers. Why did this game spawn a huge franchise and arguably become one of, if not the leading mascots for Capcom? So while I played through this game, let's take a look back and see how it was made and what hurdles Kitamura and his team had to go through in order to introduce the world to the Blue Bomber. Let's give some context on the company that eventually developed Mega Man. Capcom was founded by Kenzo Tsujimoto, who is still the president of the IREM Corporation. This business was built from two separate companies, the IRM Corporation, which was founded on May 30th, 1979, and the Japan Capsule Computers Co. Limited. I know, a really long name, but both companies had similar interests, as they both were in the industry of producing and distributing game machines. Later, in 1981, the companies changed their name into Sunbai Co. Limited, and finally on June 11th, 1983, Tsujimoto founded Capcom Co. Limited, as they merged with Sunbai Co. Limited. They chose to name Capcom since it came from the name Capsule Computer. This was the final iteration of the Capcom we know now. Anyway, during the company's reshufflings and renamings, Capcom was still designing arcade machines in order to separate them from the widespread adoption of gaming on PCs. This was back in the 90s when computers looked more like this. They wanted their arcade machines to be known as capsules filled with fun. It also helped that these machines also prevented IP theft and pirated copies from being easily and widely distributed. But with the release of the NES or Nintendo Entertainment System in the mid-80s, things started to change. The company decided to pivot towards making home console video games instead of solely developing for arcade machines. This led to many arcade games getting ported over to consoles. Small tangent, but this could also be why games back then were much more difficult. Companies wanted you to feed them more quarters into the machines instead of beating the entire game in one go. Now, while they were also developing these games, Capcom also pushed for plans to create a wholly new title for the company aimed squarely at the Japanese market. This decision led to some problems later on, but we can talk about those unique problems later. With the plan set, they brought on a couple of fresh-faced talents in order to create this new game. This small team comprised of 6 core people, with Keiji Inafune designing and illustrating the main assets found in this game. Inafune during this time was also a college graduate from Osaka Designers College in Japan, where he received a degree in graphic design. Now, after graduating from university, he decided to join Capcom as an illustrator. Originally, he wanted to work at Konami, which, similar to Capcom, had pivoted from arcade cabinet style games to at-home console gaming. But Inafune decided against going to Konami, as it was too far from where he was living at the time. After joining Capcom, he entered the Street Fighter team, where he illustrated the portraits for the game's characters. After designing some of the portraits for the Street Fighter characters, Inafune moved on to working more for Mega Man. Finally, we can see what he started working on after joining that small team of 6. He started illustrating and designing many of the characters and enemies found in the game. Along with these characters, he also designed the electric-themed boss Rockman. While Inafune was allowed to stretch his creative muscle while working on this game by creating illustrations, due to the size of the team, he immediately had to start working on rendering the sprites of each of the characters he designed in the game. This mix of skills led to many of the developers of the game dipping into and out of their specialty, where the designers would wear the developers' hats and vice versa. This led to an interesting mesh of skills that were applied to the creation of the game. Much of the inspiration for the designs of the main character for Mega Man came from Osamu Tezuka's Astro Boy. While they were designing Mega Man using more artistic influences, the technological limitations also bled through into the creation of the characters, as the team decided to use blue as the signature color for the protagonist. Since the NES had a limited color palette of only 56 colors, most of the shades would have been in some form of blue or cyan. This allowed Inafune to add more detail into the Blue Bomber's design. With most of the designs coming from Inafune, many people assume that he was the originator of the design itself, but that honor goes to Akira Kitamura. While much of the designs came from Inafune, along with developing much of the sprite work, Kitamura created the original static sprite of Mega Man, which was then further developed by Inafune. This led to Inafune insisting that he only did half the job in creating him. Some more More characters were also in the works or completed when Inafune came along, such as many of the bosses, while some of the side characters such as Dr. Light and Roll's basic sprites were fully completed. Still, Inafune had much more work to do, such as working on what he would later call his favorite character that he designed, Rockman, along with Dr. Light and the evil scientist Dr. Wily. During the period in development, there were still questions raised about what to call the main character of the game, as the name Mega Man wasn't given yet. The team thought of Rainbow Man due to the change in colors, as Mega Man would equip different weapons, but decided against it. Instead, they decided to take some influence from the rock and roll genre. Literally, they named the main character Rock and his sister Roll. This led to the name Rockman as the title for the game in Japan. The supervisor for the game wanted a simple system that gave way for deeper gameplay, so the team used the game of rock, paper, scissors as a base. Each weapon would deal a large amount of damage to a certain boss, but might do very little damage on other robots. This led to a system where the players would need to think carefully about what weapons to use on which boss. While we're on it, let's talk about the gameplay that finally ended up in the game. Mega Man was built as a side-scrolling platformer, similar to the likes of Super Mario Bros. But each of the 6 levels in the game is chosen by the player. This adds to the deeper gameplay that the supervisor wanted, as the player would need to choose which boss to fight given the weapons at his disposal. Mega Man's basic blaster would be able to do some damage to the bosses or to the basic enemies that might come up, but to better defeat the robotic bosses known as the Robot Masters that are found at the end of each level, Mega Man would need to use the signature move of the most effective boss in order to deal the most damage. He can do this by getting special weapons, which are dropped by the bosses after defeating them at the end of the level. The player would need to reload this ammo with these special weapons by defeating basic enemies, but his main shooter has unlimited ammo. After defeating all 6 bosses, a 7th level opens up, and in this level, you would need to traverse the robot factory that belongs to the evil Dr. Wily, with a boss rush near the end of the level, which finally leads to fighting Dr. Wily himself. The team also came up with multiple storylines and plot lines for the game, such as using the damsel in distress trope, where Rock would need to save his sister Roll from a kidnapping, but they decided against it. Instead, the final story that the team came up with was about robots developed by the robotic designer Dr. Light, who would help humanity. While these robots, now commonplace, helps humanity, they decide to start attacking their creators. Some of the more important robots, the Robot Masters, also decide to revolt against humans. Dr. Light finally understands that his old nemesis, Dr. Wily, was behind this attack. With Dr. Light lost at what he was supposed to do, his right-hand robot, Rock, decides to undergo an upgrade. After upgrading, he becomes a fighting robot, gaining the ability to shoot with a built-in cannon on his arm and donning the name Mega Man, or Rockman in Japanese. The game, as I told you before, opens up into a sort of non-linear story where it doesn't really matter who Mega Man goes after first. All Mega Man needs to do is defeat all the masters in order to collect their cores. After collecting the cores, Mega Man then goes after Dr. Wily at his factory. There, Mega Man fights newer, more difficult robots, along with taking on a boss rush of clones of the previous masters. This all culminates then with a final battle between Mega Man and Dr. Wily. After all of this, Mega Man returns to his life with Dr. Light. Along with cutting back on the story a fair bit, the music also had some limitations to it as well. The entire music was handled by a couple of people. Manami Matsume, under the pseudonym Chan Shakoran, composed the music, taking around 3 months, with Yoshihiro Sakaguchi acting as sound manager. Sakaguchi also developed the sound drivers for the game, which was then used by Matsume. Matsume was heavily influenced by the heavy industrial feelings. Much like many of the other games during this era of game development, there was a huge amount of technical limitations due to the power of the NES. This meant that they had to simplify their musical development by composing all of the music with only 3 notes at a time. The game was soon released to Japan on December 17th, 1987, with North America and Europe getting the game soon after. At the time, many critics loved Mega Man with its mix of action and challenge along with the above-average graphics, although some people felt as if the graphics weren't pushed far enough, but the game's mechanics more than made up for it. With those mechanics came the increased difficulty and the less than forgiving game design. This led to many people finding out how hard Nintendo games could be, as the first game in the series is widely considered a difficult game, with some parts of the game being pretty unfair at some points. Those who came back to play this game after the newer releases felt that the difficulty spike was way too much compared to the later entries in the series. But before I get too carried away with the formation of the Mega Man series, I should probably talk about the first game's infamous localized release. The heads at Capcom believed that Mega Man would be a failure of a release in Japan. This led them to produce a limited limited amount of games at release, but with the game quickly selling out, Capcom realized that they had struck gold. Soon after, they quickly greenlit a localization for North America as they tried to capitalize on the popularity of Mega Man, so they rushed a localization of the game to market. With it came a big decision. Would the current Japanese box art of the game be enough to convince North American consumers to pick the game? Well, no, of course not, thought Capcom when they decided on what the North American box art should be. But then this abomination was created in a single day, coming at the cost of the North American market. Inafune believed that the failure to gain traction in the US was squarely placed on this blue and yellow clothed individual carrying a pistol, which is seen in the front of the game's box art. Many parts of the box art were flat out false, such as Mega Man being dressed in a mix of yellow and blue, and him being ready to use his Second Amendment right with prejudice. Over the years, this controversial box art was the worst of its kind, but later on this was taken as more of an in-joke within the community, as this new character was played in Street Fighter Cross Tekken as Bad Box Art Mega Man. The game did okay, but through word of mouth, the sales of the game increased, enough so that a second game was greenlit, officially making Mega Man Capcom's newest series. This game, simply titled Mega Man 2, included many design decisions that were originally cut from the first game, whether it was due to the size and space limitations found in the original, or time constraints leading to less features. With all the successful elements being kept for the most part, except for the interesting box art in the second game, it led to Mega Man becoming one of the more successful and long-running series in Capcom's catalog. In fact, Mega Man became such a success that Capcom had to reissue a second run of the first Mega Man game in North America in 1991. But even with the game getting sequel after sequel, they still used the simple 8-bit style design. It wasn't until Mega Man 7 that the game finally updated its graphics for the more modern era of 16-bit gaming. There have also been several remakes and re-releases of the first Mega Man game, whether it's through the phone release or through compilations. The first Mega Man has persisted throughout generations. I think that the reason Mega Man is so successful was that it allowed for those of us who enjoyed simple platformers like the original Super Mario Bros. To delve into a slightly more complicated game, whether it's through the story being a bit richer in character design and development, game mechanics that needed a bit more planning and forethought, or just choosing which bosses to attack and in which order. Those small changes stacked up over time started to create a deeper game. This has been the history of Mega Man by Capcom. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.